Before we jump right into it, I'm just going to explain something real quick. Basically, I'm going to give a quick review of each season, since they are so different quality-wise, and also because of the whole Netflix thing. And then talk about the show as a whole. Spoilers will be contained only within each season or before, not after. Alright, let's get started. Season 1. I really liked this season, and it got me hooked to the series after the first few episodes. We really get to see Johnny in a different light. He's an asshole, but he ain't all that bad. We also get to see what he's going through. It's not pretty, and it's hard for me not to sympathize with the guy. The new characters they introduce are pretty great. For example, there's Hawk, who starts off as this quiet, shy kid who gets bullied for his cleft lip. And all of a sudden, one day, after talking down from Johnny, he pulls up with this crazy-ass mohawk and newfound aura, and confidence, and fighting prowess. It's great, he's fucking awesome, albeit a bit douchey. But most importantly, the new pupil they introduced, Johnny's first real student, Miguel, is very likable. He's a dorky, sweet kid and very loyal and studious, and it really grows on Johnny. Let me just say, I think they have the best sensei-student relationship in the entire franchise. We see how Johnny brings the best of Miguel and vice versa. We see both of them grow, but also how the consequence of one's past mistakes can catch up to them later on. In this case, Johnny's parental neglect of Robbie, a delinquent who's lost and who's dealt with abandonment by both parents. Daniel in this season is the antagonist, which makes things interesting and portrays the morality of the show in a very gray hue, because Daniel himself isn't a bad guy. Heck, he tried to extend an olive branch to Johnny despite all the trauma he's been through with Cobra Kai, even if it might have come off as a bit patronizing. And he got him a new car. This led to some interesting interactions between the two, hinting towards a friendship that, under different circumstances, could have been. It becomes a passive battle between an asshole trying to make things right versus a good guy who's wound up way too tight. Both sides have a valid point in how they act, though I will say Daniel is nowhere near as annoying and pretentious in this season as he will become later on. Overall, this season has a lot of grit, humor, drama, action, and the ability to become simple yet complex at the same time. 10 out of 10. This is the heart of the Cobra Kai series and probably the best season, though that's not to say the show becomes bad, even if the quality does noticeably drop. Think of Yakuza 0. For a while it was considered the best game in the series, but that's not to say you can't enjoy the sequels. That being said, Season 2. People didn't seem to like this season, and I kind of felt the same way. The pacing is very slow and it starts veering towards high school drama territory. They do reintroduce Kreese, who slithers his way back into Johnny's life after it's revealed how pitifully he's lived his own life for the past years or so, only to reveal that he hasn't really changed his evil ways. He develops a parasitic relationship with Johnny in his dojo, planting the seeds for takeover by corrupting the minds of Johnny's students, especially Hawk. Dude kinda stoops to a new low, even having the nerve to steal a deceased war hero's Medal of Honor. An important new character they introduce in all this is Tori, who's this feisty girl who comes from an underprivileged background. She develops a bitter rivalry with Sam after a misunderstanding on the latter's part, but we'll talk about her later. The main highlights of the season are 1. Seeing Miguel's journey to darkness, and then back. Towards the end of Season 1, despite popping off in karate, Miguel shows a side that no one's ever seen before, due to his anger with Sam breaking up with him and seemingly leaving him for Robbie. The anger, hatred, and violence begin to consume this otherwise nice kid, and having Kreese guide him towards a darker path doesn't help either. Thankfully, he still shows glimpses of moral standards, and his loyalty towards his sensei eventually snaps him out of it. Twice, the second time being not so fortunate. Which leads me to the second highlight of the season. Seeing Johnny, despite all his flaws and tendencies, making conscious efforts to grow as a person, and seeing it all blow up on his face. Pretty bad. It's hard not to feel for the guy in this season. Thankfully, Miguel's mom, Carmen, sees this and tries to help him out. She's another great character they introduced to the series. Very compassionate, but also strong in her own way. They develop this romance and I think it works out quite well. Okay, I might have lied. There is a third highlight of the season, and it's the high school battle royale they had in the finale. Shit was just pure chaos. It was great. And the ending was incredibly shocking and heartbreaking. 7 out of 10. If not for the fight at the end, and if not for Johnny and all the funny shit he says and does in this season, I would have rated this lower.
And put one of those hash browns at the end, like hash brown team Cobra Kai or something. And then send it to the internet!
Season 3. People also didn't seem to like this season, and well, I kinda disagree actually. Sure, it's no season 1, but there's plenty of stuff that makes this season interesting. You see the relationship with Johnny and Miguel hitting a very high point, as Johnny's there to help him rehab. Both of these characters go through a lot this season. You see what Robbie goes through as a consequence of his actions, some of which were unintended, like Johnny not visiting him or the whole communication ordeal with Sam. Man, talk about bad timing. You get to see Daniel visit Okinawa and meet some familiar faces. Loved this whole interaction between the two, by the way. You learn more about Kreese and what he had to go through in Vietnam that shaped him into the ruthless bastard that he is. You see Hawk starting to realize that he's becoming who he hated. Lastly, you finally see Johnny and Daniel squash their beef for good, seemingly, thanks to an old friend, Allie, who, through little to no fault of her own, was the catalyst for the beef in the first place. I think people don't like this season because there's not a lot of big fights going on, but rather little fights that fit into a narrative, which is understandable. They were trying to fix things from Season 2 while setting up for Season 4, which really ups the ante action-wise. One character that really annoyed me this season, though, is Tori. They try to make her all sympathetic as a character and stuff, and I mean, yeah, I do feel for her situation, but girl, you ain't helping yourself here. Like, have you considered not doing stupid shit like breaking and entering someone's home? Also, another gripe. Eagle Fang? Really? Shit was so funny, but man, that is so stupid, even for Johnny. Anyways, I give this season an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed it. It brought some closure here and there while also hyping up the next season as finally Johnny and Daniel team up with Phil Collins' music in the background, and they tease the return of one of the most iconic villains ever. Season 4. Terry Silver is back. Or is he? Either way, he and a couple of other characters we'll get to later definitely carries this season. The way they incorporate Silver in this season is very interesting. Initially, he seemed at peace and unwilling to fight, let alone lead Kreese's violent dojo. Hell, he was even a bit ashamed about how he acted in the past. Even when he was manipulated into coming back, his teaching style, while still very practical, was a lot less ruthless and petty. His pragmatism and objectivity was at odds with Kreese's methods, which started to piss him off and led him to become increasingly hostile. This in turn started driving Silver further and further off the deep end, and it was really interesting to see him slip even further into his evil ways and into the spot of the most threatening villain in the series. If only Kreese just left well enough alone. The other character that carries this season is Robbie, who joins and leads the students of Cobra Kai simply despite the most important people in life who have let him down, Johnny and Daniel. However, he starts realizing what he's done and is doing wrong when he puts himself in his dad's shoes for the first time by mentoring a bullied kid. He sees how Cobra Kai's teachings corrupt his beloved student, who went from this scared, lonely little kid to one of the most vicious and hateful bullies in the series, and it kills him on the inside. Before I talk about the last MVP of this season, I want to give a shout out to Amanda, who, despite what happened to her household, had the foresight to see the hardships that Tori was facing and decided to reach out to her. She is the catalyst for Tori getting her life back together and eventually backing off of Sam, along with other things going right. But now let's talk about the GOAT, or rather, one of the GOATs, Hawk. I loved this character. Dude had so much presence in every scene he was in. Was it the hair or personality? I don't know, maybe both. But I fuck with it. My boy's character arc was quite a roller coaster. From bullied kid to Chad, to vicious bully to repentant student. A very simple character arc, but sometimes simple ain't bad, right? Anyways, he gets put through the ringer in this season on his path towards repentance and redemption. He even gets his mohawk shaved, oh no! Because of this, he is back to square one, having to struggle with identity, on top of his already apparent insecurities regarding his appearance. It took a lot of reflection and his best friend Dimitri having his back, where he realized that he doesn't need the hair to be badass. This allowed him to find his balance, and that, along with joining and learning defense from Miyagi-Do, shaped him into the extremely well-rounded fighter that we got to see in the All Valley. On the topic of the All Valley tournament, that shit was pure hype. Robbie and Hawk has got to be the most intense and hype fight in the entire series. Shit had me on the edge of my seat the first time I watched it. Another really hype fight was the Johnny and Daniel run back beforehand, where for some reason Johnny gets really jealous of Daniel's grip over Miguel, who, by the way, is just caught up in all this BS, the poor kid. Meanwhile, Daniel worries about Johnny's style of karate and influence over Sam, and then it eventually escalates into this run back. The training montage before that fight was so over the top hilarious though. I also want to briefly mention how Daniel pulled out all the stops in this fight, even using Chosen's forbidden pressure point technique. Yet somehow Johnny countered that shit on the fly and held his own. His IQ and EQ may be low, like really low. Like he's really stupid in this season. But when he's fighting, dude's a freaking genius. This season gets a 9.5 out of 10. Compelling character stories minus the main characters, and a lot of good ass action. Season 5. This is the fan service season. If you're an OG fan or someone who's super invested in the series, this is a 9 out of 10. If you're just a casual watcher, you'll probably be like, what the fuck is this shit? 7 out of 10. A lot of stuff that happens in the season is kind of dumb and inconsequential, but regardless, I lean a bit more towards the former's case, so I give this season an 8.5 out of 10. It's very fun and enjoyable to watch, with Chosen carrying a lot this season. A lot of people, me included, want to see more of Chosen and want to see him fight against Silver. And we do. And it's awesome. The two strongest characters in the franchise. Mike Barnes makes this long-awaited return and we get to see Chosen fight him as well. It's also the only season where Johnny and Daniel don't fight, verbally or physically. Like, wow, that's actually unheard of. Also, Robbie reconciles with not only Johnny, but also Miguel and Hawk. They become buddies! I honestly don't have much else to say about this season, it's pretty clear cut. Just a feel-good, fan-servicey, action-filled season. Now season 6. This is the most Netflixified season in the series, I think. At least up until a certain point. Like by now, I thought it was pretty obvious Netflix just wanted to milk this show by dragging it out as long as possible, rehashing a lot of already repeated plot points, and having characters do stupid things that not only didn't make any sense for them, but regressed any character development they had in the previous seasons. Johnny! Daniel also reaches an absurdly high level of fucking annoying, especially with his glazing of Miyagi. Still, a lot of stuff is inconsequential and could have been skipped or condensed into less than one season. Like, seriously, they dragged this shit out big time. You could easily just skip season 5 and the first 2 parts of season 6, and you wouldn't miss out on much. Other than Robbie patching things up with everyone, some good acting performances here and there, one by Peyton List, and well, a kid fucking dying! But that's about it. The only saving grace is part 3, which is what I will talk about because man, that shit hit the spot. Johnny fans rejoice. That is how you complete a redemption story. Somehow, this part retains the heart that was found in the first season. When you get that, along with the production value increased, improved choreography, higher stakes, higher emotions, and completed character arcs, you get a masterclass on how to finish a story. It's so rare that you get such a happy ending in a TV show that's gone on for so long and is consistently enjoyable, but I ain't complaining. A recurring message of this part is that everyone owes themselves at least some happiness, which is very important in this day and age where there are just so many bad or bittersweet endings in fiction and where mental health and morale has taken a downward spiral, in no part thanks to what's been going on in the world. So thank you, Cobra Kai, for providing us with a much needed escape from the chaos and leaving us with a profound message or two along the way. Also, the acting in this part was phenomenal, like Emmy-worthy. William Zabka and Tanner Buchanan destroying those bad actor allegations for good. There was at least one scene with Johnny Lawrence that had me bawling my eyes out, and that very rarely happens when I watch a movie or a show or play a game or just consume any media for that matter. In fact, it was like the second time that's ever happened in my life. The first time being the ending to Like a Dragon Gaiden. All in all, this part is peak Cobra Kai, along with season 1. This show is like a peak sandwich, or should I say it's sandwiched between Twin Peaks. Well, never thought I'd make a reference to a show like that here. Anyways, let's talk about how well the major character stories wrap up real quick. Sam realizing that she doesn't want to fight, and that's perfectly okay. That along with her wanting to find success her own way and to live her own life. Tori realizing that karate, the very thing that damn near ruined her life, can also be the very thing that gives her her purpose and happiness. Robbie coming into terms that he may have the worst fucking luck in this shitty world, and that despite everything, learning to appreciate how far he's come in life, thanks to karate, and that his life is far from over, because he's in good company. Also, things work out perfectly for both him and Tori regardless, so yay, all's well that ends well. Hawk and Dimitri don't only find common ground for college, but upon discovering just how crazy their knack for computer science is, they apply and get accepted into an even better school, Binary Brothers for Life. Kenny and Anthony had finally squashed their beef by then, with Anthony showing that he was willing to humiliate himself to atone, while Kenny being appreciative of that, having already suffered through plenty of humiliation himself. Devin learning the hard way that cheaters never prosper and she's gotta earn her victories, so she strives to become a more honest, honorable fighter worthy of her beloved sensei's respect. Chosen coming to terms with being rejected by a childhood sweetheart, but realizing that, sometimes you can find love other ways. Kreese finally realizing the error of his ways and making genuine efforts to do what little he can to make things right, not expecting to be forgiven. I love the parallels in these shots with his back turned towards Johnny, where he went from smirking slyly like the conniving snake he was, to just genuinely sad, hurting, and regretful. Silver letting his bloodlust and desperation for existential validation consume him, stooping to new lows, gazing further into the abyss as his mortal clock keeps ticking, only to have the abyss consume him in the form of a fire, started by his worst enemy, no less. Now let's talk about the MVPs of the season, starting with Miguel. Prime Miguel is back, and badder than ever. His arc completes itself in a perfect full circle here, and oh man, I really love this little part where he just locks in on Axel, ready to avenge his stepbrother. Oh, that entire fight of him versus Axel is just perfect. The flashbacks really did it for me, man. Daniel, okay. He actually learns a lot, and by this part, is honestly the MVP of the season. Bro's kinda like a fucking sage, while also privately struggling with feeling lost and helpless, thanks to both being the first-hand witness to a kid dying and finding out that his beloved mentor and father figure may have had a dark past. He realizes that, no matter what, people are fallible creatures, but it doesn't have to take away from what they teach. Sometimes, what they teach can be used to not repeat history's mistakes. He finally realizes there are times when Miyagi-Do is not the way to go, as everyone is different, which becomes evident when Daniel agrees to be Johnny Sensei for the final fight. Speaking of which, he takes a huge step in his character development by coming to terms with his past and letting Cobra Kai be reinstated if it's what needs to be done and if Cobra Kai can change for the better. These lessons helped him find true balance, finally, and allowed him to truly help Johnny in his fight. Bro gave Johnny advice that literally saved him from losing a very close fight. Best of all, towards the end, as it turns out, Miyagi wasn't some demon sorcerer, killer, assassin thief all along, but rather a man who tried to enact vigilante justice and do what was right, for it to blow up in his face. I think I've said enough about Daniel. Let's talk about Johnny. Finally, and very fittingly, the show reshifts its focus on Johnny, albeit this time a more mature Johnny. For this review's sake, I'm just gonna ignore a lot of the excessively stupid shit he did in seasons 4, 5, and the first 2 parts of season 6, because, what the fuck? Not caring about Miguel's well-being in season 4, throwing a petty tantrum in the middle of work, while working for a friend who literally gave him the job out of consideration for his financial situation in season 6. It's pretty clear they regressed Johnny's character development to drag out the plot and milk the show for all of its worth. If not for that, Johnny would honestly be my all-time favorite character in any TV show ever. Thankfully, this finale reminds me just why he's up there. From the beginning, the most important theme of the show is second chances, redemption, especially Johnny's redemption, and this part brings it back full circle, and then some. We get to see how far he's come in life. We get to see him mend his broken relationships, unlearn some toxicity by being more vulnerable and open as a man, conquer his demons, be more grateful as a person, be a good mentor and a caring father. We get to see him really grow as a person. That juxtaposition of the scene where he, during his drunk and depressed years, visited his mother's grave, that shit was moving, man. But most of all, we get to see him win. Big. Season 6 did a pretty good job building up his rivalry with Sensei Wolf in such a short time. Speaking of which, I just want to say, holy shit, this dude was a menace. I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for Louis Tan because on top of his martial arts prowess, he did such a good job portraying this cold, calculating final boss of a villain. Sensei Wolf had hella aura. You could feel it in every scene he was in, and I honestly wasn't sure if Johnny was gonna win this fight. Shit had me on the edge of my seat. I was bracing myself for like a Rocky 1 style ending, Or as long as he goes the distance, he'll be happy and in his way victorious. I'm glad they didn't though, because that's just not how Johnny does things. The fight was pretty good. Louis Tan might have had to slow down a bit at times so William Zabka could keep up, but honestly, Zabka still pretty much got it. Overall, it was a very satisfying, happy, and heartwarming conclusion to this long roller coaster of a series. Again, it's so rare for a show to go on for this long, be consistently enjoyable, and get a good and happy ending. I give part 1 a 6 out of 10, I mean it was bad. Part 2 an 8 out of 10, the fights and the new characters were alright. And this part, a 10 out of 10. Overall, 8 out of 10. The final part did everything right. Sure, some might complain, oh, but this character didn't appear, or, oh, this character didn't get any screen time. But at that point, all the character arcs were pretty much wrapped up in my opinion. I'd rather them only be there if it made sense without dragging things out, and I don't think it would've. All that being said, doing the math here by averaging the numbers, if I were to rate the show as a whole, I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed this show, and it will forever have a special place in my heart. It's a nice escape from the dull and oftentimes bleak realities of life and the world. It's got everything. It's funny, it's emotional, it's got well-written characters, it's got pretty heartfelt life lessons, it's got good fighting. Of course it's got its ups and downs, it's not perfect, but you know what? Life isn't perfect. And that's kind of the point, right? Well, then again, part of the blame lies on Netflix and its greed, but I digress. It's a great show, and I hope you all enjoy or have enjoyed it as much as I did. Case closed.